"Move, Nanny," Vivian Hart hissed, and the crystal ballroom watched her shove Clara Whitaker one step out of the golden light. The white lace headband in Clara's dark blonde hair slipped crooked, a small, humiliating thing beneath $1,000 chandelier, while three supermodels in silver gowns covered their smiles behind champagne glasses. Then Dante Moretti, the most feared man on the Chicago North Shore, stopped mid-sentence with six-armed bodyguard behind him and looked at Clara as if the entire room had just disappeared. He did not look at Vivian. He did not look at the cameras, the donors, or the women his advisors had paraded in front of him all evening like polished offerings. He walked straight to the large plus-size Nanny standing alone on the marble, lifted two fingers beneath her chin, and tilted her face toward his. The room went silent, so violently the fountain outside seemed loud. "Who touched her?" he asked softly. Nobody answered. 7 minutes earlier, Clara had been nobody important, just the temporary live-in nanny with a staff badge tucked under her black dress. The woman Vivian had called too clumsy for a house like this, after Clara reached too fast for a falling glass near the velvet rope. What no one in that room understood was that Clara had not moved because she was careless. She had moved because from across the ballroom, she had seen 5-year-old Leo Moretti go still in the corner near the locked nursery corridor, his tiny fingers clawing at the cuff of his black suit, his eyes fixed on the red wine spilling like blood across white marble. Clara had seen that kind of silence before. Not in mansions, not under chandeliers, in daycares after fathers stopped coming home, in crisis rooms where children learned to disappear inside their own bodies. She had stepped between the boy and the crowd before the first scream could rip out of him. And for one impossible second, Leo had stared at the white lace edge of her headband, as if it were a handrail in deep water. Then Vivian saw Dante looking. That was when the shove came. That was when laughter fluttered through the women behind her. "Careful," Vivian purred, her diamond bracelet flashing. "You're blocking the view. Some of us were invited to be seen." Clara's throat tightened, but she did not lower her eyes. Her wide shoulders stayed square beneath the cheap black fabric of her uniform, her soft, heavy body planted with a steadiness the room mistook for shame because they had never known the difference between taking up space and begging for it. Dante's black onyx signet ring brushed the air near her jaw, close enough for every camera to catch, but not close enough to claim her. Not yet. His face remained unreadable. Only his eyes changed, dark and flat, moving from Clara's crooked headband to Vivian's hand, then to the marble where red wine spread in a thin, accusing line. One bodyguard shifted. Another touched his earpiece. Somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, a child made no sound at all, and that was worse than crying. Clara heard it anyway. Her gaze flicked toward the corridor before she could stop herself. Dante saw the flicker. "You noticed something," he said, barely above a whisper. Vivian laughed too sharply. She noticed the dessert table, probably. A few guests smiled because cruelty was safer than silence in Dante Moretti's house. Clara's fingers rose to straighten the white lace headband, slow and deliberate, as if refusing to let anyone turn it into a mark of shame. "Your son needs the noise lowered," she said. "Now." The last word did not sound like a plea. It sounded like a boundary. For the first time all night, Dante Moretti did not give an order immediately. He simply stared at the nanny everyone had dismissed, while the most beautiful women in the room stood frozen behind her. Then the smallest monitor on a bodyguard's wrist lit up red from the nursery wing, and Dante's hand dropped from Clara's chin. "Lock the ballroom," he said. "No one leaves until I know why she was the only one watching my son." The ballroom doors sealed with a velvet soft thud, and every smile died at once. Clara stood beneath the chandelier, with Dante Moretti's order still hanging over her head, her white lace headband crooked from Vivian's shove, her pulse steady only because Leo's silence frightened her more than the armed men around the walls. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Dante's black-suited guards shifted into position like pieces on a chessboard, blocking the exits while the women in silver gowns stared at Clara as if she had dragged a bomb into the room instead of noticing a child in distress. "This is ridiculous," Vivian whispered, but even her voice had lost its shine. Clara did not answer. She lowered her hand from her headband and looked toward the nursery corridor, where the red light on the bodyguard's wrist monitor kept blinking in sharp, soundless pulses. She had learned a long time ago that adults loved noise when they were afraid. Children did not. Children vanished inside themselves. That was the difference most people missed. Clara Whitaker had spent years being underestimated in rooms exactly like this one, even when the floors were linoleum instead of marble. Parents at expensive daycare centers looked past her soft, heavy frame and saw inconvenience before competence. Agency coordinators saw her broad hips, her cheap black flats, the way her uniform pulled at the seams after 12-hour shifts, and decided she was useful for emergencies but not pretty enough for photographs. They called her dependable when they needed someone to stay late, clumsy when she bumped a narrow table, sweet when she stayed silent, and difficult when she refused to be treated like furniture. Clara had stopped trying to become invisible. She was too solid for that, too present, too tired of apologizing for needing space in a world that charged women rent for every inch. Earlier that evening, before the gala swallowed the mansion, she had been assigned to the upstairs corridor with Leo's weighted blanket folded over one arm and a sensory kit in her pocket. The agency had warned her that the Moretti boy was challenging. The housekeeper had warned her not to touch anything. A guard had warned her not to ask questions. Clara had listened to all three warnings and then noticed the one thing none of them had. Leo flinched whenever crystal glasses chimed together. Not at shouting, not at footsteps. Glass. So she had quietly asked the server to move the drink trays away from the nursery doors. He laughed until Dante's nearest guard looked over, and then he moved them. Now, standing in the ballroom with the entire room blaming her for the interruption, Clara felt the weight of every stare on her body, her uniform, her crooked lace headband. She felt it, but she did not bend beneath it. One of Dante's men stepped closer. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, not kindly. "The boss wants you in the East security room." Vivian gave a small, triumphant breath. Finally. Clara turned her head just enough to meet the woman's eyes. "If he wanted me removed, he wouldn't have locked you in with me." A ripple moved through the guests, quick and nervous. Across the room, a camera above the carved marble arch tilted, its black glass eye focusing directly on Clara. Dante had left the ballroom without another word, but his attention had not left her. The guard opened a side door she had not noticed before, revealing a narrow private hall lined in dark velvet and silent men. Clara took one step forward, then paused to straighten the white lace headband with both hands. Not for them, for herself. Behind her, someone muttered that a nanny should know her place. Clara kept walking. At the end of the hall, the security room door opened before she touched it, and Dante Moretti's voice came from inside, low and controlled. "Show her the footage." "Show her the footage," Dante Moretti said, and the East security room obeyed him before any man inside did. 6 monitors glowed against black walls, each one feeding a different angle of the mansion. The marble foyer, the ballroom, the nursery corridor, the locked garden doors where armed men stood in the rain like statues. Clara stepped over the threshold with her hands folded at her waist, the white lace headband still slightly crooked, and every guard in the room looked at her as if a woman in nanny shoes had no business standing among guns, velvet chairs, and encrypted screens. Dante did not turn around at first. He stood at the center console in a black suit cut, so perfectly it looked like a warning, one hand resting beside a crystal glass of untouched red wine, the black onyx signet ring on his finger catching the cold blue light from the monitors. Nobody sat while he stood. Nobody spoke unless he allowed it. Even the air seemed to wait for permission. On the largest screen, Clara saw herself from 10 minutes earlier, crossing the edge of the ballroom while Vivian's circle glittered behind her. The camera had no mercy. It showed Clara's wide body moving through a sea of silver gowns, her staff badge half hidden, her headband bright and small against the dark fabric of her uniform. It also showed Leo Moretti near the nursery corridor, frozen beneath a framed oil painting, his little shoulders rising too fast. Dante tapped one key. The footage slowed. Tell me why you moved before my guards did." His voice was low, almost bored, but the guard nearest the door shifted his hand closer to his jacket. Clara understood the room then. This was not a conversation. It was a test with locks on every exit. She looked at the screen instead of at Dante. "Because your guard were watching hands," she said. "Weapons. Pockets. Adults." Dante's eyes flicked to her reflection in the monitor. "And you were watching?" "A child." No one laughed. The footage rolled again. A waiter lifted a tray of crystal flutes near the nursery corridor. The glasses chimed together, delicate and bright. On screen, Leo's hands curled into fists. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Clara felt the old ache behind her ribs, the one that came whenever adults mistook silence for obedience. "Stop it there," she said. The room chilled. One guard took a step forward, offended by the command. Dante raised 2 fingers without looking at him, and the man stopped as if a leash had tightened around his throat. "Why?" Dante asked. Clara swallowed, then made herself answer without shrinking. "He is not misbehaving. He is bracing." That sound means something to him. Dante's jaw tightened once. It was the only crack in him. On another monitor, Vivian Hart appeared near the ballroom bar, smiling too brightly as she spoke to Marco Bellini, Dante's underboss, a silver-haired man with polite hands and dead eyes. Marco leaned close to Vivian, then glanced toward the nursery corridor with the calm of a man checking a clock. Clara noticed it before anyone explained it. Her gaze moved from Marco's face to the waiter's tray, then to the timestamp in the corner. The same tray had passed the nursery doors 3 times in 6 minutes. Not by accident. Dante noticed her noticing. "What did you see?" he asked. Before Clara could answer, the security room door opened. Vivian stepped in wearing diamonds and wounded pride, with Marco behind her like a shadow that knew where to stand. Her eyes dropped to Clara's headband, then lifted with a smile sharpened for an audience. "Are we really letting the help invent trauma now?" she said softly. "Just because she embarrassed herself in a pretty room?" The guards went still. Dante's ring clicked once against the marble console. Clara did not move, but on the frozen monitor behind her, the waiter with the crystal tray was already turning toward Leo again. The insult landed in the security room like a champagne flute cracking against stone. Vivian Hart stood under the blue monitor light with Marco Bellini at her shoulder, smiling at Clara's crooked white lace headband as if it were dirt on the marble. "Trauma," Vivian repeated, almost tenderly. "How convenient. A big, clumsy nanny knocks herself into the center of a gala, and suddenly she is the only person in this house who understands Mr. Mauvais. Marco's polite expression did not change, but his eyes moved to Dante. "With respect, boss, this is becoming a security issue." Clara felt the old heat crawl up her throat, not from shame alone, but from the way everyone in the room turned her body, her job, her uniform into evidence against her. The guards watched her hands. Vivian watched her face, hungry for a crack. Dante watched everything. His black onyx signet ring rested against the marble console, motionless, the quietest threat in the room. "She should be removed before she upsets the boy further," Marco said. "The agency can send someone more appropriate by morning." Vivian gave a soft laugh. "Someone who doesn't block half a doorway, perhaps." One guard's jaw tightened. Another looked away. Clara did not. She reached up and straightened the white lace headband, slow enough for Vivian to see that she had not one. "Do not touch my employment file to cover what you missed," Clara said. The words were quiet, but they cut cleanly through the room. Vivian's smile thinned. "Your employment file?" She stepped closer, diamonds flashing cold. "Sweetheart, you are wearing a costume and standing in a room where men decide whether families survive the week. Know the difference between being useful and being important." Her manicured fingers lifted toward the headband, not quite touching it, but close enough to make the insult physical. Clara held still. Her soft, heavy presence did not retreat. She had learned long ago that some people only fell tall when someone else ducked. Dante's eyes dropped to Vivian's hand. The temperature seemed to fall. "Vivian," he said. One word. No volume. "No merci." She lowered her hand, but she did not stop. "Look at her, Dante." She panicked over a child standing quietly near a hallway. Now she's inventing patterns and serving trays. Are we really going to let a temporary nanny embarrass your household in front of donors, families, and half the North Shore? Marco slid a tablet onto the console. On its screen, a freeze frame showed Clara stepping quickly toward Leo in the ballroom, her body between the boy and the crowd. Taken alone, it looked abrupt, clumsy, almost aggressive. Clara understood the trap instantly. They had chosen the angle that erased the crystal glasses, erased Leo's hands, erased the moment before fear swallowed him. Dante looked at the tablet, then at her. He had not condemned her. He had not saved her. Not yet. Explain the angle, he said. Clara's pulse slowed. She looked past the tablet to the live monitor behind him. The waiter with the crystal tray had reached the nursery corridor again. This time, Marco's reflection appeared on another screen, his thumb pressing once against the inside of his cuff. A tiny gesture, a signal. The waiter shifted the tray higher, directly beside Leo's door, and the delicate glasses began to tremble before they chimed. Clara's hand tightened around the edge of the console. "Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice suddenly sharp enough to make every guard turn. "Stop that, waiter." Clara's warning split the room before Dante's men could decide whether to obey a nanny. On the live monitor, the waiter lifted the crystal tray beside Leo's door, and the first delicate chime rang out like a tiny bell inside a tomb. Leo's small shadow jerked behind the frosted glass. Clara did not wait for permission. She moved. A guard reached for her arm, but she shifted her weight and planted herself with such quiet, immovable force that his hand stopped in the air, useless. "Do not rush him," she said, not loudly, but with the kind of authority people only recognized after it was too late. Dante's signet ring clicked once against the console. Let her pass. The hallway outside the security room had gone too still. Clara stepped into it with every camera and every suspicious man following her, her soft, heavy body no longer looking out of place against the marble, but necessary, like a wall between a child and a storm. The waiter froze beside the nursery door, tray trembling. The glasses sang again. Leo made no sound, but his fingers appeared beneath the doorframe, curled tight against the polished wood. Clara saw the whiteness of his knuckles. She saw the way he held his breath until his whole body became a locked room. "Set the tray down on the carpet," she told the waiter. He looked past her to Marco, not Dante. That was the mistake. Dante saw it. So did Clara. Marco's expression remained smooth, but his thumb pressed once more against the inside of his cuff. The waiter lifted the tray higher. Clara moved before the glass could chime again. She did not snatch. She did not panic. She stepped in close, angled her broad shoulder between the tray and the nursery door, and caught the silver rim with both hands. Her palms shook, but they did not slip. The tray lowered under the steady pressure of her weight and balance until the crystal settled soundlessly against the runner. One glass tipped. Clara caught it against her hip before it could fall, trapping it there with a controlled breath. The corridor watched a woman they had called Clumsy prevent the sound every armed man had missed. Behind the door, Leo's fingers loosened by 1 small inch. Clara lowered herself slowly, keeping her voice soft. "Leo, the glass is quiet now." No answer. She did not force the door. She did not reach for him. She only bowed her head slightly, letting the white lace edge of her headband fall into the narrow strip of light beneath the nursery door. "See? Same as before. I'm still here." A pause. Then 2 small fingers touched the lace through the gap. The security room went silent. Not polite silent. Terrified silent. The kind of silence that meant a room full of powerful adults had just realized they had been useless. Vivian's face hardened. "She trained him to do that," she snapped. "This is manipulation." Marco stepped forward at once. "Boss." She ignored protocol and put hands on a potential evidence carrier. Clara stood, keeping herself between Leo's door and the waiter, the white lace headband still crooked, still visible, no longer ridiculous. "He was not evidence," she said. "He was scared." Dante walked into the corridor then, slow enough that every guard made room before he reached them. His eyes went first to Leo's fingers still holding the lace, then to the waiter, then to Marco's cuff. The black onyx ring on his hand looked suddenly less like jewelry than a verdict waiting to be spoken. "Nobody touches her," he said. Vivian opened her mouth. Dante did not look at her. "And nobody touches my son's door." Clara felt Leo's fingers tremble once against the lace. She did not move away. Dante stopped beside her, close enough for his shadow to cover the marble at her feet, but his voice remained cold, controlled, unfinished. "Bring the waiter inside," he said, "and Ms. Whitaker stays." "Ms. Whitaker stays," Dante said, and the corridor changed shape around those 3 words. Not softer, not safer, only sharper, because in Dante Moretti's house, being kept close could mean trust, suspicion, or a grave being measured to fit. 2 guards pulled the waiter into the security room, his crystal tray abandoned on the carpet like a failed weapon. Clara remained kneeling outside Leo's door, the edge of her white lace headband still caught between the child's small fingers. She did not tug it free. She did not look at the men waiting for her to explain herself. She waited until Leo's grip loosened on its own. "Good," she whispered through the gap. "You did that. Not me." Behind her, Dante went absolutely still. No one in his world spoke to Moretti blood that gently without asking permission. No one treated his silent son like a person instead of a crisis, an heir, or a problem to be managed. When Leo's fingers finally slipped away, Clara stood slowly, one hand braced against the wall for balance, her body steady despite the humiliation still burning under her skin. Vivian watched from the end of the hall, furious that the room had not returned to her. Marco watched Dante. Dante watched Clara. "Inside," he said. The security room swallowed them again. All black glass, cold monitors, and men pretending not to breathe. The waiter stood between 2 guards, pale now, his eyes flicking toward Marco until he remembered not to. Dante noticed. Clara noticed that Dante noticed. On the main screen, the corridor footage looped silently. Marco's thumb pressing his cuff, the tray rising, Clara stepping between glass and door, Leo reaching for the lace. Dante tapped one finger beside the keyboard. The black onyx signet ring struck the marble console with a soft, final sound. "Tell me what I missed." It was not an apology. It was not praise. It was more dangerous than both. Clara looked at the frozen image of herself on the monitor, broad-shouldered in a cheap black uniform, headband crooked, body planted in front of the door no one else had thought to protect. "You trained your men to watch for weapons," she said. Marco trained someone to use a sound. A guard cursed under his breath. Marco's face hardened by 1 careful degree. Vivian laughed once, brittle and bright. "This is absurd. She is guessing." Clara turned to her. "No, I am remembering." The room stilled again. Clara did not raise her voice. Leo flinched at the glasses before anyone touched him. The waiter passed the nursery 3 times. He looked to Mr. Bellini before he disobeyed me. And when the sound stopped, Leo reached for the only thing that had stayed in the same place twice. Her fingers brushed the white lace headband, not hiding it now. Dante's eyes followed the movement, and something in his expression shifted. Not warmth, not surrender, but recognition sharpened into threat. He looked at Marco. "You will not speak." Marco's mouth closed. Then Dante looked back at Clara. "What do you need to keep my son calm?" Every guard heard the question for what it was, a partial transfer of authority. Vivian heard it too. Her face went white with rage. Clara felt the weight of the room tilt toward her, heavy enough to crush a weaker boundary. She met Dante's eyes anyway. Less noise, fewer strangers. No one near his door unless I approve it. A muscle moved in Dante's jaw. "Approve. If you want my help," Clara said, "you do not get to use me like furniture and call it protection." The silence after that was nearly beautiful. Dante Moretti, a man who had buried louder men for smaller insults, only studied her. Then he removed the black onyx ring from his finger and placed it on the console between them. "Anyone who crosses that line," he said, "answers to me." Clara looked at the ring, then at the locked nursery door on the monitor, understanding the offer and the trap inside it. Dante had not crowned her. He had drawn a boundary in blood-colored stone and asked whether she was brave enough to stand inside it. The black onyx ring sat between them like a small, polished country, and every man in the security room understood that Dante Moretti had just drawn a border. Clara understood something else. Borders protected. Borders also trapped. She looked from a ring to Dante's unreadable face, then to the monitor where Leo's nursery door remained closed and quiet. "I'll stand there for him," she said. "Not for your pride." A guard inhaled too sharply. Vivian's lips parted in offended disbelief. Dante did not blink. For 3 long seconds, the most dangerous man in the room only watched the woman everyone had tried to shrink, and Clara refused to look away. Her white lace headband was still crooked, her uniform still cheap beneath the mansion's cold light, her body still marked by every cruel glance in the room, but her voice had not trembled. Dante picked up the ring, not to put it back on, but to hand it to his chief guard. "East Wing protocol changes now," he said. "No tras, no cristad, no unapproved staff. Ms. Whitaker clears the nursery threshold." Vivian made a sound like a laugh breaking in half. "You cannot be serious." Dante finally turned his head toward her. "I rarely repeat myself." That was all. No shouting, no threat. Yet 2 bodyguards stepped between Vivian and Clara, as if the air itself had received orders. Clara should have felt relieved. Instead, the pressure deepened. Being protected by Dante Moretti did not feel like sunlight. It felt like being moved into the center of a locked room, where every shadow had a gun. He walked beside her down the private corridor toward Leo's wing, close enough that she could feel the silence people made for him. The rain pressed black streaks against the tall windows. Somewhere behind them, Marco spoke quietly into his phone before a guard's stare made him lower it. Clara noticed. Dante noticed her noticing. "You see too much," he said. "No," Clara answered. "People show too much when they think the nanny doesn't matter." His eyes cut to her, and for the first time, something almost like amusement touched the edge of his mouth. It vanished before it became softness. At Leo's door, Clara stopped. Dante stopped with her. The corridor narrowed there, forcing his shoulder close to hers, black wool beside cheap cotton, blood money beside hourly wages. The contrast should have swallowed her. It did not. She lifted a hand before he could reach for the handle. "If I go in, no armed men behind me. No commands through the door. No using him to test me." A bodyguard shifted, insulted. Dante's gaze stayed on Clara. "You give rules in my house." "For your son," she said. "Yes." The silence stretched, dark and dangerous. Then Dante raised one hand, and the guard stepped back. Clara turned the handle slowly. Before she entered, his voice stopped her, low enough that only she heard it. "Vivian will try to ruin you before midnight." Clara looked back once. "Then tell her to hurry. I have a child to calm." For a heartbeat, Dante looked at her, as if the ballroom had disappeared all over again. Then Leo's small voice came from the other side of the door for the first time all night, thin as a thread and aimed at Clara alone. "White lace! White lace!" Leo whispered, and the words were so small Clara almost thought the house had imagined them. Dante went motionless behind her. Every guard in the corridor forgot how to breathe. Clara did not turn to celebrate. She lowered herself to the nursery floor, slow and steady, and let the edge of her crooked headband hang, where Leo could see it without forcing him to look at her face. "Yes," she said softly. "White lace is still here." His fingers reached for it, trembling, and for one fragile second the Moretti mansion stopped being a fortress. Then the East Wing speaker screamed. Not an alarm. Worse, 3 bright crystal chimes, amplified through hidden ceiling vents, sharp enough to cut through Leo's first brave breath. The boy folded instantly, hands clamping over his ears, his body shrinking toward the corner of the nursery like the sound had shoved him there. Guards surged forward. Clara moved faster. She planted her heavy body in the doorway, one palm flat against the carved wood, the other lifted toward Dante's men. "No one comes in." "Move!" a guard snapped, panic making him stupid. Clara did not. Her broad shoulders filled the doorway with immovable calm. Not blocking rescue, blocking chaos. You rush him now. You teach him the room is dangerous forever. Dante's voice came from behind the guard, cold enough to stop blood. Do what she says. The speakers chimed again. Leo's breath hitched into a silent scream. Clara grabbed the weighted blanket from the chair, where she had left it earlier, and dragged it across the carpet with both hands, not throwing it over him, not trapping him, just laying it near enough for him to choose. Leo, she said, keeping her voice below the sound. Look at the lace. Not the ceiling. The lace. His eyes found the white edge. His fingers found the blanket. The third chime never came. Clara heard the cut before anyone else did. The sudden dead space in the speakers, the kind of silence made by a manual override, not a system failure. She looked past Dante to the black camera dome above the corridor. Its red light blinked twice, then went dark. Marco Bellini appeared at the far end of the hall, with Vivian beside him, too composed for an emergency. She triggered a lockdown. Marco said, voice smooth and grave. Boss, she isolated your son behind a closed door and blocked security personnel. This is exactly why unvetted staff cannot be allowed near the air. Vivian's face was pale with satisfaction. She wanted him dependent on her. You all saw it. Clara felt the accusation land, felt the old shape of it. Big woman in the doorway. Easy to call dangerous, easy to call too much. She kept her hand on the frame and her voice even. If I triggered it, why did the chimes play before the lockdown light? Marco's eyes sharpened. Dante turned his head. Clara continued, quieter now, deadlier because she was certain. And why did the nursery camera go dark after Leo calmed? Not before. No one spoke. Clara pointed to the black dome without taking her body from the doorway. Check the security room. The command did not come from here. Dante's black onyx signet ring was still with his chief guard, still controlling the new East Wing protocol. But Marco had known the old one. He had known the sound. He had known exactly how to make Clara look like a threat. Leo's fingers tightened around the white lace. Clara looked at Dante, not pleading, not shrinking. Someone inside your house just used your son against you. Dante's face emptied of everything human. Pull the logs, he said. Marco took one step back before any guard touched him, and that single step told Clara she had been right. Marco Bellini did not run. Men like Marco survived by never looking guilty, even when the floor was opening beneath them. But when Dante ordered the logs pulled and the chief guard returned with the black onyx signet ring in one hand and a tablet in the other, Marco's careful face lost its blood. The command history was brutal in its simplicity. Old East Wing access. Bellini clearance. Audio override routed through the nursery vents. 3 crystal chimes scheduled exactly after Leo spoke. Vivian Hart's name sat beside the event note that had moved the press cameras back toward the ballroom doors, ready to capture the unstable Nanny being dragged out. Clara read it once, then looked away from the screen and back at Leo, who still sat with the weighted blanket in his lap and 2 fingers wrapped around the edge of her white lace headband. He was breathing. That mattered more than watching Marco fall. Dante did not shout. He did not need to. Remove his access, he said. A guard took Marco's phone. Another stripped the Moretti pin from his lapel. Marco's mouth opened. Dante, think about what this looks like. Dante's eyes were black glass. I am. Vivian stepped backward, diamonds trembling at her throat. She set this up. Look at her. She wanted a scene. Clara stood then, slowly, her body aching from holding the doorway, her uniform wrinkled, her headband pulled slightly loose by Leo's small hand. She looked nothing like the women Vivian had arranged beneath the chandelier. She looked like someone who had survived being underestimated and refused to become cruel from it. No, Clara said. You wanted a scene. I wanted him safe. Leo's fingers tightened once, as if answering for her. Dante heard it. Everyone did. 10 minutes later, the ballroom doors opened again, and the room that had laughed at Clara Whitaker went silent for a second time. The chandelier still burned above the white marble. The supermodels still stood in their silver gowns, clustered like polished knives. The red wine stain remained near the velvet rope, dark against the floor, exactly where Vivian had shoved Clara into the light, and try to make her small. This time, Dante entered first, his signet ring back on his hand, his bodyguard spreading behind him with the calm precision of a verdict. Clara came beside him, not behind him. Leo walked on her other side, one small hand holding the loose end of her white lace headband, not as a leash, not as a joke, but as a thread of safety he had chosen himself. The room saw it. Vivian saw it. The cameras saw it. Dante stopped in the center of the ballroom. He looked at the women his advisors had displayed for him all night, the models, the heiresses, the perfect faces built for photographs and alliances. Then he turned his gaze to Clara, and the answer to the title of the evening became painfully clear. He had refused them because none of them had seen his son. Clara had. Vivian Hart is no longer welcome in any Moretti property, Dante said. His voice stayed low, but every phone in the room seemed to lower with it. Her contracts with our charity foundation, security partners, and North Shore donors are terminated by morning. Vivian's face crumpled beneath the makeup. You would destroy me over a nanny? Dante stepped closer, not to her, but to Clara. No, he said, over my son. Then his hand lowered, palm open, not grabbing Clara, not claiming her like property, offering the room a new law. And over the woman who protected him when all of you watched her be humiliated. The supermodels who had laughed behind champagne glasses looked down first. One guest stepped aside, then another. A path opened through the richest people in Chicago like marble cracking. Clara did not move until she was ready. She adjusted the white lace headband with both hands, the same small gesture Vivian had tried to turn into shame, and when she lifted her chin, it no longer looked like part of the uniform. It looked like a soft crown. Dante's chief guard approached her and, for the first time, did not speak over her. Ms. Whitaker, he said, the East Wing staff will take direction from you. The words rippled harder than any kiss could have. Clara looked at Dante. For Leo, she said. Dante's expression softened only enough for her to see it. For Leo, he agreed. And because you're the only person in this house I trust to tell me when I am wrong. Leo leaned against Clara's side, calm beneath the chandelier. Vivian stood stripped of every room she had tried to own. Marco was gone without ceremony, and Clara Whitaker, the clumsy, curvy nanny they had shoved out of the light, remained in the center of it while the Moretti household quietly rearranged itself around her.